So here's a couple of EPD reports that are out there that you may have seen. The one on the right just has some general information about the animal and EPDs, and the one on the left, just some general information. The one on the right is more of a marketing piece that shows the EPDs along with their pedigree. And here is a EPDs that when you're looking at the information online as to what you will see in your account for your EPDs. And so there's different ways that you look at this data, but the one thing that's common to all of them is that block of information. And that seems to be what gets everybody turned around. So zooming in at the EPD data, this is the mass of numbers that get people confused. So we're going to break this down by column and line, and hopefully it's going to end up making a little bit more sense. So EPDs are an evaluation of an animal's genetic worth as a parent. It's their genetic profile as to what they're going to produce. It provides a prediction of how their progeny are expected to perform relative to the progeny or the other animals that are in the EPD program. So they're all ranked, and trait values are all based upon each other, based upon the average, and then it's the trait value and ranking is established from the whole group. EPDs were developed to improve mating selection in livestock. They are highly effective. It's a science behind it. Would take another class, but feel free to ask any questions that you don't understand how it comes up with some of these things. We'll see what we can address here today. They're relatively new to alpacas and to the community. Most alpaca breeders don't have a livestock background, so they hadn't heard of them before. And so they're kind of new with alpacas, and they're probably more misunderstood in this and in the alpaca environment and industry than there are in other industries. The initial use of EPDs was done back in the 1970s by the California Dairy Association, and then also picked up in the 90s by the Angus Association. And within a short period of time, 5 to 10 years, both of those associations became the top producers in their industries just by using the data and adopting the data very readily. EPDs are simple, they're quick, they're easy to use, they're inexpensive, there's no invasive testing that's required. But the purpose for them is to breed for offspring to improve its sustainability and marketability. And in dairy, they used it to produce better quality milk and higher production. Angus was to improve meat and production, and to do it as quickly as possible. So the purpose of using EPDs for alpacas is to improve their sustainability. And this is a slide that I use in my other program you may have seen. It shows a raw commercial of average alpaca worldwide of average alpaca that's selling for about $6 a pound. You got the big 200-pound, or that one's a 100-pound bale that brought it just under $700 for,
I think it was the blanket project.
115 pounds. And then the little box of 18 pounds that brought in 864 of royal grade. So you can kind of see that there is a process, if you want to make money with alpacas, as to how the quality of the fiber that they're producing is a big part of it. We're talking at $48 a pound, but their top raw fibers in merino can go as high as thousands of dollars a pound, depending upon the qualities that it has. And that's a sale. There's been several. That's a bale that sold for $670,000 in Australia, or several $1 million bales that have sold in Australia as well. So there is a demand for high quality fiber, but it's meeting the needs of what that buyer wants. Obviously, are very tough. For sustainability in alpacas in the U.S., we're probably around $80 to $100 pound range is where we need to go, and what we need to be looking at to really make it sustainable for raising herds in the U.S. Outside the U.S., maybe less, but our costs are a little bit higher. Now with EPDs, we can help the fiber get there pretty quickly, just if we use proper breeding selection. All right. Currently, we're reporting on 9 fiber traits plus birth weight, a 10th trait. It's a yearly calculation. It's free to participate in the program. The only cost is that you get your fiber tested. It's about a $12 test, and that's being done currently in New Zealand. Currently in 22, there were about 24,000 wakaya that were submitted into the program, about 18,000 suris. And totally, as far as the data that's used to calculate the EPDs, there's about 85,000 animals in the constructed pedigrees that gets us our EPD data and its reliability. CSU runs the EPD program for AOA. They do it for other livestock industries as well. EPDs provide a prediction of what an offspring's fiber production will be over its lifetime. There isn't any one year or any particular time that data is referring to. It's just showing how that animal is going to produce over its lifetime as compared to all the other animals that are in the program. Kind of gives you that. And we'll take a look at ranking at some point here as well. They allow for a very accurate comparison of animals across the country, regardless of environment. And age is also an environment. So you can compare animals of different ages to see. It's reliable to compare animals at different ages and at different parts of the country in order to help with your selection. It's a program that crunches millions of points of data in order to come up with its prediction, and it rechecks its prediction with each report, and that also helps increase its accuracy as well as give us heritability rates. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Trait values, as I said, are a prediction of change in offsprings as it relates to the participating animals. These are the traits that are currently being tracked. The desirable values that you're looking for can either be negative or positive. And if you take a look at the traits on the left, the negative or smaller trait values, less than 0, are desirable. And on the right, traits greater than 0 are going to be desirable. So you want to reduce fiber diameter, but you want to increase fleece weight. You want to reduce standard deviation. You want to reduce fibers over 30. So we're always looking to make those smaller, whereas staple length and curve and fleece weight, we want to make those larger and bigger numbers. So keep that in mind as we're looking through that. Currently, the average in the population is pretty close to 0, but average in the population does not have to be 0. For an example, a trait value of -2 micron for AFD would mean that animal's contribution to breeding would lower the offspring AFD by 2 micron as compared to the rest of the population. So it's going to be 2 micron finer than the average of that whole population. Or a plus 0.5 of a pound would mean that its contribution would be an additional ½ pounds of fiber weight as compared to the group. It's not an actual weight, it's how much they're producing. So one of the things we're always looking at is reducing fiber diameter. And as I mentioned, we want that to be smaller, and we're looking at fleece weight to be larger. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know where this is going and what we're going to run into, and we'll show you how EPDs will help that. So we're looking at the two traits, we're looking at the traits here along with values. So you got the trait in the first column and value in the second column. These are the numbers that the program comes up with. And combined, it's called a trait value. The whole block of information is a genetic profile. And we're going to start by looking at average fiber diameter, the first row up on top, AFD. So when this started in the AOA EPD program here in the US, the public program, I don't remember how many animals were in the population, but obviously the animals that were participating was much smaller. There was a private program, and most of those people all moved over to this one. But the rest of the alpaca population was still trying to figure out what this is about. So it was a smaller program. The average micron at that time in that first EPD report was 24.2 micron. Now in 2022, we've got a larger population of animals, and our average fiber diameter is 22.4. Keep in mind that the average is slow to move because all these animals at the bottom in the orange, which are 24 micron and above, they're still in the program. So it's only the new ones that are coming in that are the lighter color at the top that are breeding for those finer animals that are moving that up. And there's a lot of people breeding that are still in the average, but they're not really, looking to get up into that area, up into that finer range for one reason or another. Now, these animals at top and the 18 to 20 micron range, they're likely producing royal grade fiber for some or most of their life already, and which is referred to as persistent fineness. But that's something that over time will develop and will get to be more and more. So where this goes into the, at some point here in the near future, is that this is going to continue to get taller, and there's going to be more animals that are less than 18 to 20 micron. And we'll have a much larger production of royal grade fiber. And as that growth of production increases, there's going to be a more commercial interest in the fiber. It's the way the fiber industry works. The key to profiting from it, though, is having a good collection and sorting system. And, until we get to that point, I don't think there's enough money in the program where it is now to really put together that kind of a program.
If you think of the approximately 250,000 animals in the United States, Surreys and Mokayas, half of them have fiber which is going to be finer than average, and half of them are going to be having fiber which is coarser than average. So if we all have a similar goal that the sustainability of the industry is going to be finer, we're only dealing with half the animals in the United States that are going to be really providing that type of fiber for commercial use.
Yeah, eventually we get to be more and more. I mean, we're always going to have pet breeders. If you take a look at the goat industry, you don't see many people talking about their $75,000 goats, but
they're there.
So the same thing will happen in all. And you could look at this as being the triangles of being industry where your best producers are at the top. There's going to be less of them, and they're always looking to make it better, and that keeps moving it up. EPDs just allows this to move very fastly, very quickly, and for you to reach your goals. The trait value, again, is a prediction of what an animal's offspring will produce over its lifetime. When improving traits, you need to recognize that by changing one trait, that it's going to have an effect on another trait. It's either going to be positive or negative. And we're going to take a look at trait ranking here at the end, so you can see how to use that in your breeding program. But changing trait values are either going to be complementary or contradictory to other traits. These traits tend to be complementary. In other words, if I'm going to select on average fiber diameter, we're going to have a similar positive relationship to spin fineness, curve, modulation, percent of fibers, and standard deviation. Let's take a look. So this here is a spreadsheet that I have, and I've color-coded the trait values because the numbers are confusing and people's heads tend to swim when they start thinking of numbers like minus 3.402. Well, so what? Who cares about that? What's different about this is that I have a sort here of I've downloaded about 18,000 animals that are from the AOA system here a few years ago, and look to see how this relationship is. So this spreadsheet of complementary traits is 18,000 animals, male or female wakayas of all colors. And this is a sort of AFD, spin fineness, percents over 30, median curve, modulation, and standard deviation. These were the complementary traits I just showed you in that slide. And this is sorted starting with the finest animal in the program, minus 3.402. And as I go down, you're going to see that as that first column gets lighter and lighter green, so do the other ones. It kind of follows suit as to what's happening. If I go and I keep going, I'm going to go real fast here. And as we go down and we keep down to the bottom, you can see that it turns orange and red down at the bottom, and that the others kind of follow suit. Standard deviation is a little bit worse. It's a little bit better on top. It's something that you probably keep an eye on as you're going to breeding. But as you can see, it follows suit very much the same as the other ones go. If we take a look at contradictory traits, there's a negative effect on other traits. So you got your average fiber diameter and fleece weight are contradictory or have an antagonistic relationship on the others, as do staple length and medium curve, or staple length and AFD are also will have an antagonistic relationship. So let's take a look what that is. All right. So here's the same kind of thing. I've got contradictory traits, AFD, and fleece weight. And this is sorted on the column with the red arrow, sorted on the AFD again, and I have fleece weight next to it. And as you can see, it goes down. It gets a little bit greener down towards the bottom, but it gets very red on the AFD side. But it's very correlated as to how that works. Here's one on the opposite direction. Let's go here this way. This is sorting on fleece weight and looking at AFD. And if I select on fleece weight, what that does to my AFD. And you can see it goes in the opposite direction. Here's on staple length. This is sorted on staple length and AFD. And as that goes down, you can see that my AFD gets better as staple length gets shorter. It's hard. Without the right data, it's hard to select for animals. And that's where the difference is we have the data now. We can select for animals that have longer staple and higher fleece weight. So we don't have to go that route. But when you're using something that is very subjective based, it's hard to make those decisions. So here's one with all four of these, AFD and mighty and curve, staple length, and fleece weight. And let's just scoot down to see what that looks like. And you can see it follows a very opposite type trajectory. One of the things I'll mention real quick, you can use something like this, actually it would be a bigger slide, but you can use something like this to pick up outliers. Here's one that's kind of green all the way across all traits. Here's another one that's very green across all traits. And you can go down, and actually as you get down here a little bit lower, you see that there's more and more that are your outliers. And these are the animals that are going to help increase fleece weight, increase staple length, reduce fiber diameter, and increase curve. So if you look at it from that standpoint, there's ways of using this data to pick out the best animals that can help you get to that result. All right, so let's take a look how this is used in a breeding program. It's called using an estimated pedigree EPD or interim EPD. It's the trait value that you calculate that's based upon the average of the parents. You use it for breeding matchup selections, and sometimes if you go to register an animal before you even submit any data, you'll see that the AOA website will show that animal has an EPD assigned to it, data assigned to it. That's based upon the estimated EPD, that there was sufficient information that the EPD program just automatically assigned the pedigree EPDs. Now, once the offspring starts providing its own data through fiber production and testing, and when they have their offspring, their EPD is going to get further and further refined. And it will be adjusted according to what they're producing out there. We're going to take a look at, what do I have these circled here? I've got the AFD traits here that we're looking at. And we're basically going to look at the 4 traits that are under that are by those red arrows. We're going to look at AFD, median curve, staple length, and fleece weight so that we're not swimming through all these numbers and looking at it. I just want to give you an idea as to how this works in predicting what your offsprings are or how to predict a male for use in breeding selection. There is a estimated EPD calculator on the AOA website that you can use. You just select the parents and it'll come up with all the numbers across the board, or you can put it in a spreadsheet, put in the males that you're looking to and according with the female. So here I've got male A and B that I'm comparing and female 1, 2, 3, and I'm comparing their offspring. And it's just simply by using averages on a spreadsheet that you can calculate this out very quickly. The numbers in green are preferred. Those are the ones that are improving the dam's trait value. So what that means when you're improving the next generation is that you're improving the female's qualities. You want the next generation to be better than the females. If you use the dam that's better than the male and you try to improve the male, your breeding program will go backwards. So if we take a look at female 1, she's got an AFD of minus 0.04. So that's probably pretty average in the program. Male A is projected that his offspring, using the average of the male and the female, that offspring is going to be a minus 1.17. So it's going to improve that female's AFD by 1.21. Male B would do improvement as well, but only by about a half a micron. Median curve, same thing. Both animals are going to improve it. Male A is a little bit better. Staple length, male A doesn't do as good a job. It actually reduces the female's staple length. Fleece weight, there's more in from male A, but I'm using a blue arrow here. Male A would be the male that you would select, even with that lack of improvement on the shorter length. The reason being is that I'm increasing curve by 3 degrees. That staple length is being measured in a relaxed form so that it is going to be shorter. There's nothing there that's stretching. I'm adding more crimp to that animal. I'm adding more waviness to it of some type, and it's going to come up short. That difference in staple length is nothing that it would be unexpected for that amount of curve. So I'm not going to count that against that male. And I still think that I'm getting plenty of improvement in some other very important areas that are economically important. So I would select him for that. And pretty much the same on the ones below. Male A is still better. So that's basically how you select an animal, is just by taking the average of the two. So understanding the antagonistic relationship, the contradictory relationships in some of these traits would definitely help in your breeding selection. Now, once the offspring starts producing its own data, that EPD is going to get further refined. And what's interesting, a lot of people will do one EPD submittal and they leave it there. Oh, it's good. It's a great animal. I know how to use it. And it's close enough. It's going to be accurate enough for doing that. But what you're missing out on if you only do one submittal is the animals that improve and get better than the prediction. Those are your outliers. Those are the ones that are coming out ahead. So you do want to get more production and you want to add more data so you can find out who those are. Those are your ace in the holes that show up and this is the only way that you'll see them is through EPDs. So you have to get that information into the system and keep it updated.
People always ask, well, how many submittals should we do? Here at our ranch, we test everyone between the ages of
9 months.
9 months and 10 years. So for the first 10 years of life, we have that data to reinforce and to make more accurate those predictions. Now, other people say, well, I'm only going to do it twice, or I'm only going to do it 6 times. That's what you need to figure out for your farm.
Usually the next question people say, well, how likely am I going to be to get those results? So let's take a look at where am I? Next is heritability, and we'll look at accuracies after this in the next couple slides coming up here. So through the EPD program, we've been able to determine the heritability rates of alpacas. 10 years ago, all these traits that are listed here in high were at least 10 points, or probably about 10 points less than that. They assumed, and they thought 0.42 was very a very high heritability, which it is. Being at 0.52 is high. From comments that I've heard Dr. Enns make, these may even go higher. So the high traits, if you take a look at what these are, also all tend to be the complementary traits. The moderate traits are the contradictory traits. So the traits that are very important to improve, while it's very easy to improve fiber diameter, for an example, it's not as easy to produce fleece weight. So the art of breeding is how much intensity do you put on fiber diameter at the risk of losing fleece weight, or how much fiber diameter you're willing to risk to drop to increase more fleece weight. And that's where the art of breeding comes in, as to how to pick those up or to find those outliers that'll do, increase them both without, in the range that you like to be. So that when you select for improvement in each breeding, you can really be expected to get what you're looking for. If you were to select for lower fleece weight, for an example, that's a hard one to overcome. So it's easy to overcome a higher or coarser AFD than it would be a lower fleece weight. So in a sense, that should carry a higher priority, as well as stapling, as long as the rest of your data is within your range. So you pick up your range as to where you're at, what's your next level, what's your next generation going to be, and you try to stay within that. Now, these heritability rates are based upon a random breeding within the population. If you have any amount of line breeding or coefficient of inbreeding, you're very likely to see higher heritability rates, or better heritability rates, if that's part of what you're getting in that line bred animal. Second one that we're looking at here that's confusing is called accuracies. It's very misunderstood. There's a couple reasons for that. One is that it's easy to assume the word accuracy means reliable.
Accurate.
Well, how reliable is it? Accuracy of a trait value is stated as a value. It goes from 0 to 1, with low accuracy starting at 0. What EPD accuracy actually describes is a potential change value. In other words, based upon the amount of data the program had to go off of to make its prediction, it's going to hedge its bet by saying a number, but that it could fall within these ranges. So he's just basically giving you the spread as to what you should expect for that amount of accuracy for that data. But if we take a look at what accuracy of 0.1 or 0.2 is, about a fiber diameter plus or minus 1 micron, and I don't think many people are worried about that at this stage of the game. Obviously, if you're breeding into the top percentile rankings, that could be important. But for 80%, 90% of the breeders out there, that's not an issue. Putting in one set of, or doing one submittal into the EPD system will frequently give you an accuracy of 0.1 to 0.3. And that could also be a reason for what we're going to see as the next problem with accuracy that we run into. And probably will say this a few times. The takeaway on this is that the prediction that the program is giving you, that it's going to end up being true or better than predicted 84% of the time. You don't hear that much with people talking about EPDs. The second reason people have that, look at EPDs as not being accurate is because, or that there's a problem with accuracy, is that the report shows what the average accuracy is within the range. And in 2022, that accuracy was between 0.1 to 0.2. I think it was 0.14 to 0.24. And that is low. But that just shows that there's only probably been one submittal for most of those, or some of those could even be estimated EPDs that the program put together, when somebody registered an animal. So they're very, most of the data that's in there has been supplied on a one-time basis. The animals, though, that you'll see that are probably in the top 25%, or definitely those that are above average, are generally going to be between 0.5 to 0.8. And the highest EPD highest EPD accuracy, I think, is 0.84. It's above 8. It's above 0.8. So we're getting up there. I mean, that's been some big jumps in the last few years. So it's working very well. There's some people that are doing a great job with submitting data and putting together their information. This little chart here at the end also shows why that average is where it is because most of the data that it has in the system was entered in once, whereas the people that are submitting numerous times are just in that top little area. We're going to talk a little bit about ranking. We've looked at the numbers. We looked how to add them up and average them out for offspring. I find ranking to be the most helpful part about EPDs because it's really never easy to use a trait value, of minus 0.216 or whatever it may be. That what does that mean for that trait? But if I know what rank it is, that automatically can give you an idea of how that animal can be used in a program. And it's the same as everything else. You had your ranking in school. You're familiar with where you learned your ranking is. Nobody remembers, what their ranking was if they're at the bottom of the class. But if you're in the top of the class, everybody knows that right off the top of their head. It's the same thing with EPDs. That's why you always hear everybody talking about, it's a top 1% or top 5%. And those are good ranks. But no one ever talks about the ones that are below average, and those seem to disappear, and they never come up in a conversation. The problem with that is that it only relates to one trait. And if you're looking at using the animal in breeding, you need more than one trait. We already saw the difference between the complementary and the contradictory traits. The top fleece weight ranking is not likely to be an animal that's going to be very fine. The likelihood is that it's going to be very coarse. Could be one of the coarsest animals in the program. I think I'd mentioned that in one of the last videos about a male that won championship just because he had a very uniform, nice, coarse fleece. So this is how the percentile rankings come up. And this is in part of the producer report. All these charts that I've been showing are in the producer's report. And this shows a percentile in the first column from 1 to 90%. And it then gives us the traits along the top. And it's saying that the top 1 percentile are those that have a fiber diameter of less than minus 2.37. And then in the top 2%, 2.18 and so forth, right down the line. So that's all that it's referring to. It's just giving you an idea of where that animal ranks. And if you notice, it's ranked one percentile apart from each other for the first 5, and then the next few are 5%, and then it jumps up to 10% as it gets above average, or gets above average. It goes from 50, 60, 70, 90. But below average, it's either in 5% groupings or 1% groupings. So in the recent Rukaya report, there was 29,000, just about 29,000 males. So the top 1% would mean that animal's in the top 290. But if we take a look at this next chart here, you'll see that we actually can tell you where that animal is exactly in that rank. What is it? The top 10% would be the top 2,900. So they're good for marketing. They tell you what, that an animal has something that's going for it. But without looking at the rest of the information, there's not a lot that one ranking is going to tell you. Now, this sheet shows the animal's EPD traits, shows all the data that's up on top. And there's the ranking. It'll show that, for example, on ranking, this animal is number 201 out of 29,000 for AFD, or 135 for spin fineness and so forth. You can kind of see where it is. And here's one that has a very high curvature in the top 13%, and but is only in the top third, 25% for stapling. Actually, that's very good, but that's kind of how that works there. Also, this pedigree down at the bottom is showing the 4 generations that the EPD program uses to develop the EPD. So the information, when you supply the program on an animal, it's not that information alone that's being used, or if it is, it's going to have a low accuracy. But chances are there's going to be other relatives, siblings, grandparents, siblings, and so forth, back 4 generations that are related to that animal. And that data is also attributed to that animal's EPDs, any of the information that's put out there. On here, this column is showing that 3 generations back are all imports. Hemingway, Vengador. Anyway, those animals had data that was taken at the time of importation for, it was called the screening process. So that data was also used. So we have information all the way back to the imports on these animals to start off with. And that's basically it.